that will be Dr. Nuris Lampe from Aruba. She will speak about the prevalence of basal cell carcinoma in Aruba, a 15 years retrospective study.
My name is Jag Mohan Majhi, and today I will be walking you through our study on the prevalence of basal cell carcinoma in Aruba. This research was conducted at Dr. Nuris Lampe's dermatology clinic in Aruba, and I'm excited to present this here today at the 7th International Conference on Biological and Medicinal Sciences. So here is a quick look at what we will cover. We will start with the introduction and the aim of our study. I'll then provide some background with the literature review, and before I'll walk you through the methodology, and from there we can dive deep into the results, and I'll wrap things up with our recommendations. So let's dive in. Basal cell carcinoma, or BCC, is the most common type of skin cancer worldwide, and one of its major causes is UV radiation exposure. Now let's consider Aruba, an island located near the equator where the sun is strong and the UV index often exceeds 11. The constant exposure puts the population at a higher risk of UV-related skin cancers. Here is a map of Aruba's location. As you can see, the island's proximity to the equator means it's experienced constant, intense UV radiation. This makes Aruba a key region for studying skin cancers influenced by UV exposure. So our study aimed to explore the prevalence of BCC in Aruba from 2008 to 2023, focusing on how it's influenced by factors like age, gender, and treatment outcomes. Now, what makes this study especially important is the data gap. The last comprehensive research on BCC in Aruba was conducted back in 2001. That means we've been missing detailed information for more than 2 decades. Our research steps in to fill that gap, providing a much-needed update on how BCC affects Aruba's population today. So to give you some context, the study by Kennedy and Beidik in 2001 showed a rising trend in BCC and squamous cell carcinoma between 1980 and 1995. Most cases were found in men, particularly in sun-exposed areas like the face and the arms. Now, this was the only study on BCC in Aruba before ours. Fast forward to today, our findings show that the trend has continued, but we have a few new insights as well, such as the higher number of female diagnoses and the benefits of early detection and treatment. So we conducted a retrospective review of the patient records from 2008 to 2023 at Dr. Lampe's clinic. Initially, we started with 32,747 patients, but after excluding cosmetic cases, we narrowed it down to 24,443 patients who came in with dermatological concerns. These patients were then grouped by age, under 40, between 40 and 60, and over 60. And by gender, we then analyzed the treatment outcomes and calculated prevalence rates. Here is an overview of our data set, which includes a total of 24,443 patients who visited the clinic. In terms of gender, about 35% were male, 65% were female, and a small portion had missing gender data. Looking at the age distribution, around 47% of the patients were under 40 years old, 32% were between 40 and 60, and just over 20% were over 60. We also had a few patients with missing age data, but they made up a very small percentage of our data set. So let's move on to the result. Out of the 24,443 patients, 1,051 were diagnosed with BCC, giving us a prevalence rate of 4.3%. When we break down these results by age, we see that only 9% of BCC cases occurred in patients under 40, 27.5% occurred in those between 40 and 60, and a whopping 63.5% occurred in patients over 60. Now, it's important to note that more women than men were diagnosed with BCC in our study. But this doesn't necessarily mean that women had a higher prevalence rate. Rather, more women came to the clinic during the study period, which explains the difference in diagnosis rates only. This next graph shows the breakdown of age and gender. In all age groups, women had slightly more cases of BCC than men. Based on clinical knowledge, this difference could be linked to the fact that women are more likely to seek healthcare than men. Looking at the prevalence percentages for our next graph, we see that patients under 40 have a prevalence rate of 0.2%. It increases to 0.7% for those between 40 and 60, and it jumps to 3.4% for patients over 60. This threefold increase in the oldest age group is a crucial finding. It reinforces the idea that age is actually a major risk factor for BCC, and it underscores the need for public health campaigns targeted at older individuals. For our final graph, let's take a closer look at the yearly trends. Over the 15-year period, we can observe a steady rise in BCC cases, but there are a few notable spikes. The most notable spike occurred in 2013, where 137 patients were diagnosed. While we are still investigating the cause of this increase, one possible factor could be that there was an additional dermatologist in the clinic during this time. However, we cannot say for sure if that was the reason for the spike, and further investigation is needed. But, interestingly, the maximum number of diagnoses in 2013 happened during the months of May and September, a pattern that we also see in 2017, where there was another smaller spike in BCC diagnosis. There was also a slight increase in 2021, which may be linked to COVID-related delays in regular checkups. This pattern of peaks in May and September in both 2013 and 2017 is something worth investigating further in future studies. So, one of the most encouraging aspects of our study is that most cases were detected early and were treated surgically. No advanced tumors were reported, and follow-up data showed overwhelmingly positive outcomes for the patients. This highlights the importance of early detection. The earlier BCC is diagnosed, the more straightforward and effective the treatment tends to be. In our study, surgical intervention was the primary treatment method, and it had excellent results. So to conclude, Aruba's intense UV radiation is a significant factor contributing to BCC, especially among older individuals. Our findings highlight the importance of early detection, which leads to better outcomes. So based on our findings, here are our key recommendations. Raise awareness about UV protection, especially since Aruba's culture revolves around outdoor activities like going to the beach and cycling and gardening. Promote regular skin checks, particularly for older individuals and other high-risk groups. Early detection can make a significant difference in outcomes. Advocate for the use of sunscreen and encourage the development of covered playgrounds for children. This would help reduce the early exposure to harmful UV radiation, which can have long-term effects. As we know, UV exposure accumulates over time. And finally, conduct multi-center studies to further expand our understanding of BCC and its treatment in Aruba and the whole Caribbean region. So thank you for your time and attention. I hope this presentation has shed light on the prevalence of BCC in Aruba, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, your presentation, your nice presentation. I have a question, and that is, how do you see any association between nutrition, food, and gender with BCC prevalence. Do you see any connection between nutrition, food, or other environmental factors with BCC prevalence?
That is a great question. I thank you very much for the question. So the question is, are there any other factors that can cause BCC? Considering food, I do not know any studies that link food and diet to BCC prevalence. However, the color of the skin is related to BCC. In other tropical countries like India and other Southeast countries, BCC cases are a lot lower than what we see in Western areas, especially in the areas like UK and the Netherlands. Now the trends have increased to about 230, 240 people per 100,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas the trend in India or any other Southeast country is still at around 60 or 70 people a person per 100,000 people. So this shows a significant relationship between the color of the skin and the prevalence of BCC.
What about air pollution? Do you think that there is any connection between air pollution and BCC prevalence?
I am not sure if there is a connection between pollution. I would say that places where pollution is rampant, people might have lower BCC because of pollution in the air, and more clouds, let's say, could reduce the amount of UV radiation that people get exposed to. So that could lead to lower prevalence of BCC. But that is a very interesting view that will require more research.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your questions.